Hi, Mr. Scheer. Good to see you again.
Great to see you.
Pleasure to welcome you back to the studio. When Premier Danielle Smith signed this MOU with the Prime Minister, she said, quote, "It's a great day for Alberta and Canada." Are you saying the Premier's wrong?
Well, we just don't believe that provincial government should have to sign on to something like an increase in the carbon tax. A Conservative government would not impose that type of condition on a province. We're pro-energy. We don't believe that that the government should make it harder to get things built. We think the government should make it easier to get things built, set the rules and make it apply to everybody. So what we're saying is that two things. One, there are conditions in this bill that aren't necessary for the construction of a pipeline. And the second thing is we don't believe Mark Carney's actually serious about getting it done, because he's got this very complex and complicated MOU with lots of conditions, and then he immediately goes out and says these are necessary but not sufficient, meaning that even if the government of Alberta clears all these hoops and hurdles, that he still might say no. He said the British Columbia Premier gets a veto, and now we're hearing rumors today that they're going to vote against their own MOU tomorrow in a Conservative motion. So that's why we're saying that this MOU is not great. We believe that the federal government should be partners in prosperity, helping provinces get to yeses, not saying one thing in Alberta and something completely different in Ottawa.
A couple of different things. So I didn't hear unequivocally that BC from the Prime Minister has a veto. He certainly talked about BC needing to agree, but I've asked his ministers on multiple occasions, because of what your party has brought up, does that mean that there is effectively, not even constitutionally, but effectively a veto? And everyone I have asked has said no, that's not the case. Second of all, what your party seems to be inferring by putting this motion forward is that there is ambiguity, right? A lot of ambiguity within the MOU. Again, I'll put to you, the Premier doesn't seem to indicate at any juncture that that's the case. And even when you read through the text, like, I would have guessed also that it would be ambiguous to allow for multiple different possibilities. But it is incredibly specific. Construction of one or more private sector constructed and financed pipelines with a route that increases export access to Asian markets as a priority. It is agreed this pipeline would be in addition to the expansion of the TMX pipeline. Like, that is not ambiguous.
Well, you are right about the deliberately misleading Canadians on terms, and you talked about the veto. Mark Carney is getting famous for this, by the way, saying something and then contradicting himself in the next sentence. So when you say that a premier has to agree for it to proceed, that's a veto. I mean, you can say, you can call it something else, you can say you're trying to dance around the language, but if at the end of the day David Eby refuses to approve, refuses to sign off, Mark Carney is saying that his approval is necessary. So if that in fact blocks the pipeline from going ahead, then he's effectively got a veto. I don't think Canadians want to play semantics about word definition. I mean, I love going into word origins and things like that, but Canadians want clarity, they want certainty. And if you look at the entire MOU, there's a whole lot of conditions on there that Conservatives would never impose on the people of Alberta or the government of Alberta. And he immediately comes to Ottawa and says, even if the government does all this, even if the government of Alberta does all this, he says it's not sufficient. It still might not go ahead. And then we hear, Liberal MPs saying that it'll never get built. So what our motion is attempting to do tomorrow is to provide that clarity, give Liberals an opportunity to vote for their own MOU. We've lifted language right from the MOU. If they vote in favor, then that would send a signal that that they're at least going to back up what they sign on to. If they vote against it, or if half their caucus votes against it, it's going to be sending a very different message to Canadians. And what we're trying to show Canadians is that Mark Carney has spent his entire life fighting against energy development. He wrote a book called Values, where he defined himself as a human being and talked about the need for higher carbon taxes and leaving up to 50% of Canada's natural resources in the ground. So he's trying to reinvent himself and turn him into something that he just has never been. And the motion tomorrow is an attempt to provide Canadians clarity about who Mark Carney really is.
But is it an attempt to be political, because it is an issue that that their party doesn't fully agree on, and to exacerbate those differences when ultimately the Prime Minister did sign this MOU, right? Like, I take your point on things he said in the past. I certainly have questioned him about that. But he has gone further than I can remember any federal level going in putting down in paper, in very explicit and specific terms, exactly what this pipeline would look like, where it would go, how much extra oil beyond what exists right now in the capacity to export it would entail. Like, again, this is not ambiguous. He is signing his name to it.
Well, if you look at everything that's happened since the MOU was signed, there's a lot of ambiguity. And if Mark Carney had to come out, sign this MOU and said, I look forward to the day shovels are in the ground and I support pipelines, he still hasn't even even said that. Mark Carney still hasn't even said that he would like to see this proceed. He just says that these are conditions that are necessary but not sufficient. That's a very clever Liberal politician phrase to basically say two things at the same time, that it might happen if you do this, but it might not happen even if you do all that. It's just incredibly confusing. If the Liberals had to come out of this MOU signing with clarity, with full-throated support for the men and women who work in Canada's energy sector, excited about the prospects about opening up Asian markets to Canadian energy, we'd probably be debating a different motion tomorrow. But the fact that you've got Liberal ministers saying something completely different than what the Prime Minister said when he was in Alberta, the fact that...
But doesn't your caucus not agree on everything? Like, isn't that a part of a democracy? Like, there's not everyone is going to feel the exact same way. Ultimately, it's the person in power who's going to decide the direction of the party and the government.
But even Mark Carney and Cabinet can't even provide that assurance to Canadians that if the government of Alberta succeeds in meeting clearing all these new hoops and hurdles and all this new, the new conditions that they've imposed, they still can't even clearly say whether or not a pipeline will actually get built.
But that's what the MOU does say. Yes,
but they've contradicted themselves immediately afterwards. That's the point. They haven't been able to clearly even stand behind their own MOU. The ink it still isn't dry yet. And you've got senior Liberals talking it down, senior Liberals saying it'll never get built. So this is an opportunity for Parliament and for the House of Commons, for every MP to clearly stake out where they are. Don Davies and the NDP, very clear. They're against pipelines. Conservatives, very clear. We support our energy sector and want to see Canada develop it more and get off of the dependence of the U.S. market. Mark Carney and the Liberals trying to say two things at the same time. One thing in Alberta, something completely different in Ottawa. We just want some clarity so that Canadians can hold this government to account.
There's enough clarity in this that the AFN a week ago voted unanimously to demand the withdrawal of the deal. There's enough clarity in this that BC is very upset about the posture the government there, the NDP government there, about the posture the federal government is taking. Like, enough clarity exists for the people who oppose this potential pipeline, which doesn't even have a private proponent at this point, to voice that opposition and to make motions and vote on them. Why isn't that enough for you?
Well, because the people who oppose pipelines will always oppose pipelines, no matter what you sign and no matter what you call it or where you plan it. Canadians want to get off of the dependence of the U.S. market. They want to be able to sell our oil and gas around the world. The men and women who would like to work in those fields would like these projects to go ahead. Conservatives are on their side. Mark Carney is trying to placate both groups. He's trying to get everybody who opposes pipelines to say, hey, don't worry, this thing will never get built, and then hold out the fig leaf to Canadians who do want to develop our oil and gas, that there's this murky possibility if the government of Alberta gets everything right, then maybe. And what Conservatives are trying to do is say, no, our job is to hold the government to account. They've got this MOU. We've taken the words right out of that, and now we're going to see where every single MP stands on this issue. I think that's the role of the opposition, is to provide that clarity to Canadians and to draw that out. This should be the easiest decision in the world for a Liberal. Your Prime Minister just signed off on this MOU, 2 weeks ago? Do you support it or not? That's the question tomorrow.
Except for you did use some of the language, you didn't use all of it. I know that you're critical of the kind of bargain that's in there, the stuff that Alberta has to do in increasing the industrial price on carbon in exchange, or the carbon capture projects, for example, in exchange. But that stuff is part of what predicates the support from the Prime Minister, it would appear, and that's certainly what the Premier signed on to. You didn't include that stuff in the motion that the MPs will vote on. You very specifically just included the part about supporting a pipeline. Is it disingenuous, right? Like, are some MPs only able to support that pipeline because they feel the other side is being taken care of as well?
No, because the point of the MOU, Mark Carney didn't go and sign that MOU to build a ring road around Calgary. He didn't go to the MOU to, make other investment, other infrastructure types of things. He went to Alberta to sign a deal to get with the outcome of this MOU to be a pipeline constructed. That's what he claims. So what we're just asking Liberal MPs is, do you support this in principle? Do you support the idea of getting to a yes where a pipeline could one day be built?
But what if they support it predicated on additional measures to reduce emissions? Like, that's not included in there. You only put part of it.
No, but there's nothing in the MOU that contradicts any of that. So there's no problem for a Liberal to vote in favor of that part of it, because it's not, we're not asking him to denounce any other part of it. It's a little bit like if you wanted me to buy your house and I say, okay, well, there's some conditions, maybe you got to change the paint color and change the landscaping in the backyard, and you say, okay, so, but in principle, do we have an agreement that you will buy my house? And I say, no, maybe not. Do these things and we'll keep talking, maybe? I mean, that's not...
But wouldn't you want to make sure the conditions are adhered to before you put out that kind of money?
Yes, but if I can't even say that even if you did that, yes, you're right, you're absolutely right. You would want to as the seller. But what I'm saying is Mark Carney in this scenario is the person saying, if you make all these conditions, if you do all these things I've asked you to, then maybe. Well, that's not how business works. That's not how the world works. If you can't even say in principle,
then maybe it really isn't.
But he is. He specifically said these are necessary but not sufficient conditions.
Well, the
those are his
sufficient
words.
condition is there needs to be a private proponent that comes forward, which is
That's in the
missing from
MOU.
the Conservatives' position altogether.
That's in the MOU.
Yes, it's in the MOU. That's what
Yeah,
I'm saying. It's
but then he
specific.
immediately went out and said, but even what he said after the MOU was signed was, even if all these things were all the, if imagine all the hoops and hurdles that Mark Carney has now placed on the government of Alberta to get a pipeline built, even after all of that, he's saying it's not sufficient. That's incredibly confusing to Canadians. It's sending a terrible signal to investors that, you know, who's going to sign on to...
Have any of those investors complained so far? I've only heard positive reaction from the industry.
If you look at the energy industry, even after Mark Carney became Prime Minister,
But
they're
since
making...
the MOU?
Well, even after Mark Carney became Prime Minister, billions of dollars have gone into U.S. projects. Canadian companies are expanding their American businesses, their American projects to the benefit of American workers and American investors. That is not a recipe for success for Canada, and that's not what Mark Carney promised Canadians. And with this MOU, he promised he would move at unimaginable speeds. And again, we don't compare Mark Carney to previous prime ministers or Justin Trudeau. We compare him to himself. We hold him to the standard that he promised Canadians. He said he would move at unimaginable speeds. The timeline in this MOU are years away, and he's put incredibly difficult conditions on this that we don't believe are necessary. And now they can't even back it up with a vote in Parliament with their own caucus supporting what Mark Carney signed on to.
Okay, I'm out of time. I have to leave it there. We'll look forward to the vote tomorrow. Thanks, Mr. Scheer. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.